Hi, good morning, everybody. Nice to see that people. I hope you're all not frozen to death. Since we're talking about resilience, I think the what do you call, the day one here is testing our resilience to disease. Anyway, let me start quickly because I realize that we are running out of time, right? I believe the topic resilience is very pertinent today, especially given all the geopolitical changes that are happening throughout the world, and also issues with trade barriers, that have emerged, let's say, recently. That obviously will impact on the ability to actually sell your goods as well as import goods. And this is exacerbated by climate change. Apparently last year, 2024, the climate had basically an average increase in temperature of 1.5 degrees. So we've already sort of breached that 1.5 degree mark. And there are many issues of adverse climate impacts seen throughout the world. And obviously, this is going to impact on agricultural productivity. So I'm very happy to have two very distinguished panelists with me here today. And I will invite Dr. Serena to introduce herself, followed by Dr. Logan. Serena?
Hello, Tess. Hi, everyone. First of all, thank you for having me here. I can hear you saying hi back. Hello, Prof. Hello. So my name is Serena. I am the CEO of PMB Research Institute, which is a think tank. Before that, for 10 years, I was with Khazanah Research Institute, also a think tank looking into policy issues of the country. My training actually is, I'm a plant geneticist. I specifically look into rice disease genetics. But when I came back to Malaysia, I got pulled into the policy side of rice. So for the last 10 years, I've always looked into issues of rice in Malaysia. Are we producing enough? Should we produce enough? And what are the strategies for the country? So that's me in a nutshell. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. My name's Logan, and I'm a professor in the College of Public Policy at HBKU in Qatar. And a lot of my research works in the space in between science, research, innovation, policy, and governance. How do we bring all those together? And hopefully today we can bridge some of those gaps.
Thank you. Very efficient use of time. So to sort of frame our discussion today, let me pose the first question to both the panelists. To begin, could you share your perspective on why supportive and enabling policies are critical as technological innovation in addressing food security challenges?
Ladies first?
Ladies first, yeah.
Okay, so first of all, I assume the audience, I don't know how much you understand food security and what it means. I just want to make sure all of us are in the same page. When we talk about food security, remember, it is beyond production. It is beyond self-sufficiency. I'm not saying production is not important. That means yield, how do we increase our national production in metric ton. But things such as nutrition, things such as can you afford the food? So I want you all, the audience, to remember that always as we continue talking in this conversation about food security, don't forget, yes, production is important, but good agricultural practices, food safety, nutrition, climate sustainability, those are also important factors in food security. Okay, so when we talk about technological adoption and how is it critical, enabling policies and such forth, I get a lot of this, Dr. Hari and Dr. Logan. People say, you can have all the policies in the world, but if there's no implementation, there's no adoption, what's the point? To a certain extent, dear audience, I agree to a certain extent, but I must remind everyone as well, a good policy enables good adoption because policies generate the kind of environment that enables the adoption. So I think I give a second part to the equation or to the conversation that we should, as policy researchers, come up with enabling policy directions or advice. So I'll give you an example. In technology adoption, right? We cannot just say, by 2030, everyone must have mechanization. We should go for technology adoption. But can you create an enabling environment for technological adoption? For example, can we come up with insurances so that farmers, when they adopt the technology, it reduces their risk? What about farmers? They need money in order to adopt the technologies. Is there microcredit environments around for them to adopt? So I think policies, enabling policies are very important in order to ensure technology adoption per se. Yeah.
Logan, you want to add to that?
Sure, I'll try and be brief, but I'll start by saying this is a complex problem. It's a hard problem. That's why we're still discussing. We heard Jerry this morning talking about golden rice. We've been talking about that for a while, 20 years. So some of the challenges that we're grappling with are not simple. There's political components, there's economic components, there's global trade components, there's capacity components, awareness raising components, behavior change components, and all these things are intermingling. So we can learn from each other about how to have the enabling policies in terms of best practices globally. And we heard about some of those this morning with Dr. Mohammed, Jerry, and Aziz on what other countries are doing. What I want to emphasize is it's good to learn from others. What we need to do is implement best fit. And I keep repeating this over and over. It's one of my phrases: learn from best practice, implement best fit, because it really needs to be contextualized to the specific conditions that we're currently in. And then when we get to how do we have those enabling policies, those enabling policies can take many directions. We really need to understand our objective and what we'd like to achieve. So 2 quick examples. I worked in Ethiopia for 12 years, and we have lots of great examples of top-down change and bottom-up change. Both can work. How we affect positive change, we need to understand the type of problem we're encountering. For example, we had a top-down change around nutrition. We took a problem-based approach, worked with a number of different ministries who had aspects or different mandate components related to nutrition. Everyone needed to work together to align and have coherent policy change. And that's great. That's top-down. It was very effective. And for a resource-constrained country like Ethiopia was, that was a great success. But that's not the only way change can happen. We can have enabling policies from the bottom, where you have agricultural research centers based in communities doing the type of breeding work that Dr. Jerry was telling us about this morning, where it's locally developed, locally owned, capacity building, and you see uptake at much higher levels because people have been involved in the process and they own the process. They are participant in designing in the benefits that they'd like to see. Another example, you heard that I'm from Qatar, the state of Qatar, and here we do not have an agricultural sector of much substance. Super arid country, not a lot of water, not a lot of soils that are conducive for agriculture. We do have resources, which we're known for, but we face a lot of challenges in the agricultural sector. In 2017, we faced a blockade of our country, and this presented a major challenge for our food security sector. Top-down responses were needed for rapid innovation and industrial development. We went from 0 dairy production to 100%, or now 102, 104% dairy production, milk, yogurt, cheese, that sort of thing, in 4 years. Wow. Transformation is possible. Now, we're a country of 3 million people, so scale matters, but top-down change is possible, and we can learn from that. Maybe I can share some other examples in future questions.
Excellent.
Sorry, can I add one more, Dr. Hari? Sure. Just a quick one. If you notice, I didn't mention subsidies when we talk about enabling policies. I know we're in this discussion about technology adoption, but one thing I want to caution is that an enabling policy, if you're a private sector and you want to introduce a technology, right? And the economics doesn't work unless you have a subsidy come in. That's very dangerous. So I just want to caution that be very careful when you try to push for subsidies, because in the market, when you come up with some kind of solution that requires government support, when I mean by support in terms of financial subsidy, it often doesn't create a resilient market. So I just wanted to put it out there that I personally don't think subsidies are enabling policies. It can to a certain extent, but caution. Thank you.
Thanks, Serena. Now, pivoting slightly away from that, but looking more at Malaysian first, that means to Serena, and then the global to Logan context, what are the most pressing realities we must acknowledge when we talk about food security today?
Sure, thanks, Dr. Hari. I think I'll go broad first. Globally, we are taking more than we are giving out. We are replacing. So I think sustainability is a really pressing issue. We are just eating up on the earth, and yet we are not replacing. I'm concerned. Climate change is another issue, so I think at the global scale we have those issues. But for Malaysia, again, I think we are too comfortable historically because Malaysia has always been protected by Philippines and Indonesia. So we don't have drastic natural disasters. But things are changing, and Malaysia better wake up to climate change. Especially, I'll give you an example. More than half of our rice production is in the northern state of Malaysia. And if you know, there's always in the news of flooding. So it only takes one or two major flood in the northern state to really wipe out our rice production for the country. So I think these are things that we need to really think about and be very careful about. Should we diversify our growing places? I don't know, but these are things that we should look into. The other thing is our domestic production. We have some that's very competitive, like the oil palm industry. We have some that warrants more interest, more competitiveness, like the paddy industry, which is the total opposite of the oil palm industry. It's almost dead, actually. I think that we definitely can, for Malaysia, benefit from good agricultural practices. I really agree what Encik Azizo said previously when he said, we want to adopt all this high-tech technology, but the farmers are not even ready to do good agricultural practices. So we must make sure good agricultural practices are in place before you start bringing in, all those satellites and remote sensing. It is good, but basic agricultural practices should be there. The other thing, the last point I want to say is that we are so absorbed about lettuce, rocket salad, and tomatoes. Why are we not championing ulam? Why are we not championing pegaga, daun selom? And why are we not looking, and another thing, our grandparents and our parents, they are a bit averse to ubi kayu because it reminds them of the wartime in Japan. But hey, what's wrong with ubi kayu? I think as a community in Malaysia, we're putting it down, and I think we should uplift these local crops in Malaysia. So I think those are from me. Thank you.
Yeah, I think those that can be mechanizable, given that we have a labor shortage issue, I think those are things that really need to be re-looked at, right? Dr. Cochrane?
In addition to the climate change challenges that were mentioned, we have a much more disrupted global food trade system. And for countries that are reliant on importing significant parts of their food, like the state of Qatar, like Malaysia, like others, we really need to be paying attention to the risks to global food trade, the bifurcation of global food trade markets, the potential for inflation, and how that's going to impact accessibility and affordability for food consumers. I think this is a significant area of concern. And the second area that I'll mention for brevity is the quality of the food. For the first time that we are aware of in human history, there are more children who are obese than there are undernourished. And I say that again. There are more children globally who are obese than there are undernourished. Unbelievable. So we have a quality of food system issue. And what I want to put on the table is that we need to be thinking about resilient systems, we need to be thinking about sustainable systems, we need to be thinking about healthy systems. Those are children. Those children will grow up. Non-communicable disease burdens will increase. That'll be a burden on the state, that'll be a burden on efficiency, that'll be a burden on the care systems. So I think we really need to go back not only to the resilience and the sustainability, but also the healthy.
Thanks. Actually, this is as a result of, what do you call that, successes of many policies, right? That now we overfeed people, but unfortunately with poor quality food, right? To a certain extent. These are questions posed to Dr. Serena, right? In Malaysia, we have ambitious targets for food sufficiency, as we heard earlier, yet market realities and implementation challenges often create gaps. From your research and experience, what are the main barriers holding back efficient or effective policy implementation?
Thanks, Dr. Hari. If I can sum up what I'm about to say, I would say short-term pain, long-term gain, and it rhymes. So what do I mean by that? Short-term pain, long-term gain. I'll bring us back to the rice industry in Malaysia. It is absolutely strongly regulated. If I can get the audience to think about it this way, the paddy industry is price control at the farm end and at the consumer end, right? So if you think about the whole supply chain, there's gates at two ends of the supply chain. Now, what happened when you try, there's always a trade-off. You try to control prices at the farmers so that the farmers can have their income, and then you control at the consumer end so that it's never too expensive for the consumers. What happened? Something's got to give. So over decades, what has happened is that the middle segment is getting squeezed and squeezed because inflation happened, right? Farmers will keep complaining, paddy prices are too low, please increase. So the price floor of paddy will keep going up. But the price ceiling of rice at the shops will never go up, right? You never want to do that to your consumers. So price ceiling will always stay. So what happened? Price floor goes up, price ceiling stays, there's a squeezing. It's an artificial market. When it's artificial, you have private sector, what do they need to do? They need to survive, right? So when they need to survive, they need to make money, it's not their fault, what do? Either they do malpractice, or they have to close shop, or they have to diversify their portfolio. Either way, it creates an uncompetitive market. But what do I mean by short-term gain, short-term pain, long-term gain? If you want effective policy, the answer is simple, right? It's easy for me to say it. Remove the price control. But which politician can do that? I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm saying that if he needs to survive in order to implement good ideas that he wants to do, if he suddenly remove these policies, he will get, he or she will not be in the office for long. So we need someone who can see the long-term gain by going through short-term pain. And that pain is not easy to do. And I think I totally put my hats off. I understand that it's not easy to do, but it needs to be done. But it can be done gradually. For example, price ceiling, right? I'm not going to say, YB, remove price ceiling, float it. You're going to get 34 million angry consumers, right? But what can you do as the government? The government can do gradual or review the prices every 3 years, every 4 years. Inform the market, inform the people. Every 3 years, we will review the price. And janganlah naik 10 ringgit, naik maybe 50 cent, 20 cent, gradual. And I think that's possible. So those are some of the points that I have to share.
But surely it's also at the farm level, if you're not efficient, you don't have the productivity that you ought to have,
Yes.
then definitely the price will go up because you are inefficient.
Yes.
So there is a balancing act here, right? So how do you address?
The problem is the farms are not efficient, but in order to protect the farmers, that's where they have the price floor. So what's happening in Malaysia is that our rice is not of good quality. It's the market price is about 800 ringgit per metric ton of paddy. The quality of it is produced, but the price floor is at 1,200. It's higher than the market value of our paddy. So who's taking the loss here? So that's why we have a very inefficient industry, actually.
So this leads to the next question. How do you see the role of institutional reform, investment, and private sector collaboration in bridging the gap between policy intent and on-the-ground realities?
Okay, I think, again, you hear this a lot, public-private partnership, PPP, and we push for it. You know, there must be private sector engagement because there's only so much the government can do. But again, if it's not profitable, how are you going to expect private sector to come in? We got to be realistic about it. So when we go back to the paddy industry, for example, I can't just shout out, right? Hey, private sector, come in. How you want to come in? It's so the whole industry, you can't make a profit. But one of the work that I did, the solution that we did is that we saw in the Malaysian industry, Malaysian paddy industry, there's two types of rice. You have the price control, cheap, medium grain rice, which is for the masses. And then in Borneo, you actually have specialty rice that's not found in the rest of the world. Do you know that? There are more than 1,000 varieties in Sabah and Sarawak that you cannot find the rest of the world. These are specialty rice. It has absolute potential to be sold at the private sector as a niche market. And someone asked me, why should we promote a private niche, not private, but a niche product when it's food security? Here's what I always tell people. When you develop an industry that has profitability, such as the specialty rice in Malaysia, you develop it, you allow private sector to come in and flourish. There will always be a trickle effect into the other part of our rice industry, our more stagnant, I would call cheaper, medium grain rice. So I think there is something to benefit from this if we can open up the door and promote specialty rice, bring in private sector, because there is a profit margin to be made here. And I think from there we can look into the other side.
Actually, I saw some low glycemic index rice outside.
Yeah, fantastic.
One of the booths. So, right. And another question is, what lessons can be drawn from other countries that could inform Malaysia in addressing its agri-food system?
Okay, another thing that everyone always hears a lot, let's push for cooperative. Cooperative, we must get more people together and such. But I don't know if you noticed this, but cooperative doesn't seem to work in Malaysia. I don't know why. Most cooperatives don't become strong like we have the New Zealand dairy farm or the Australian wool associations. Malaysian co-ops doesn't seem to work. So then we need to think of an alternative solution. And I think what worked in Thailand and in some other countries is what we call contract farming. It's when you make private sector have a skin in the game, where when I mean by contract farming, what I mean by that is that private sector comes to the farmers and say, hey, if you can produce to a certain quality, I will buy from you at a certain price. And I think our farmers could benefit from that because you have the assurance, but at the same time, because there's a skin in the game, you have the private sector making sure there's a technology adoption, there's extension program, because he needs the product to be of high quality. So I think contract farming is another idea that I think Malaysia can adopt from Thailand, for example. Another thing is New Zealand. I know New Zealand is fantastic on biosecurity and traceability. I think one thing we can learn from them and adopt is the fact that they pride their products in being clean, green, and traceable. I know Malaysia is not, I mean, we are 34 million, same land size as New Zealand. New Zealand, there's only 4 million, more sheep than humans. So I know it's harder to go for that, but we can go for the halal certification. We can go still for the traceability, and we can still go for specialty product like our pepper, our rice, our durian, our tropical fruits. I think there's still potential there for us to learn from New Zealand in that sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Serena. Now, this pivot from the Malaysian perspective to a more global perspective on policy models, and now address questions to Logan. So from your international work, what policy models or frameworks have proven most effective in enabling the adoption of agricultural technologies at scale?
We often ask this question, what policy do we need? And sometimes we get ministries working on a number of different policies in parallel, or even one ministry, many different departments working on different policies or projects, programs, interventions. And they may, in their individual components, make small progress here, there, wherever. Sometimes we have policy incoherence, meaning one ministry pushes in a direction that way, and another ministry pushes in a different direction. So this could be some of the economic things that we just heard about. I actually think we need to step back and move a level up, rather than jumping to what is the policy we need to enable ag tech innovation or uptake of new innovations at the farm level. And think broader at what is our big objective? What would we like to see? In the strategy, food security strategy for the state of Qatar, what we did really well, I think, and it's public if you want to search for it, is we had very clear objectives, 4 pillars and 4 clear objectives, what we would like to achieve in this implementation period. And after that, the policies can follow and the policies can be aligned. Once we have those objectives, we can identify why are we not achieving that objective. And this goes to root cause analysis. You have to figure out what is the real problem we're grappling with. Even this morning, we've heard many different problems. So which of these is the most severe? Where can we unlock the potential if we have a policy shift? And we have to see what are the potential unintended negative consequences of that policy shift. So a really holistic look across ministries and across sectors so that we can achieve our objective. And this might get a bit more into the planning and strategic space, but if we take a theory of change approach, we can also figure out, once we know our objective and we understand the root causes and the spheres of control that we have over these different root causes, and we develop an implementation plan, we can have a theory of change about how best to achieve that goal. Should it be top down? Should it be bottom up? Do we need adaptive learning systems where information is flowing round and round? Different solutions for different problems, but if we don't understand the problem, we may not have the right solution approach. And the last thing is we need to become a learning, let's say, whole of government. So those different ministries, those different partners from the farm to the top are continuously having these learning feedback loops. We often see governments, organizations get stuck. We have a 5-year plan, and at the end of the 5-year plan, we do an evaluation, and we realized, oh, that didn't work. We can't afford to lose another 5 years. We need learning mechanisms where we're revisiting progress with clear indicators, ongoing monitoring, and then adaptive management approaches so that every 2 months or every 4 months, we're continuously learning and improving as we implement. And I think this will help address some of the implementation gap that we started talking about.
Great. That sounds wonderful. And obviously, it's been working very well that you've, overproduced your milk, right, in Qatar, right? Next question basically is touches on what happened in the last session, this issue of inclusivity, right? Sort of balancing innovation with inclusivity, and how governments design policies to ensure that smallholder farmers and marginalized communities can benefit from technological advances.
The very quick answer is they need to be best fit, tailored to the needs, just as Azizul was telling us in the last session. And the second thing, which he also mentioned, is that for whomever you're designing these policies, they need to have the agency to influence them. So that sounds really simple, but if we're designing policies for youth, they better be in the room and they better have power to influence those types of decisions. If we're designing it for a particular community, agricultural entrepreneur community, whomever it is, they really need to be a participant and not just in the room, but helping to craft those policies. We heard about the disconnect this morning already. So there are great opportunities to get those who are at the front end of who are supposed to be adopting these new technologies and those who are developing them to be in the same space. We often see a big gap, and we heard about it already this morning. High-tech innovation emerging and great opportunities in high-tech emerging, but at the farm level, we're not moving much in tech adoption. So there's a big gap, and this space is largely because those communities are not involved in the actual design and implementation of new policies. And maybe I'll add even further what I just mentioned on the adaptive learning management system. When we design those monitoring metrics, those same people also need to be involved. So we call this, participatory monitoring, goes by a whole bunch of names, could be knowledge co-production or evaluation co-production. But here, we might be tracking the wrong things, or we might be measuring the wrong things. And having this inclusive space can help address some of those, where we are tracking the right things. If I give you a couple of examples, I was doing some work in a rural and remote part of Ethiopia. And we were using some standardized surveys that were used by FAO and other agricultural organizations. And they have standard metrics to track which households are food insecure and when might we need to intervene to have an emergency distribution to prevent forms of malnutrition. So that's a standard approach. You go and you do these household surveys to try and figure out, in regular monitoring practices, where are the food insecure households. But we stepped back and said, let's ask these households themselves, how would you measure this? How would you monitor this? The indicators that they gave were completely different than those in the standardized surveys. So I'm not saying what the FAO is doing is wrong. What I am saying is that we can learn from the people themselves. What are some examples? Those households said, if you want to know which homes are the most vulnerable, look to the homes where they've sent their children out to cities for very precarious and vulnerable labor. They went to be construction workers, shoe shiners, home workers. If the households reach that level, they're already at emergency level. They wouldn't take their kids out of school and send them to the cities for this type of work unless they really ran out of food. But that was not in the food. These kind of duress forms of migration were not in the surveys. So we could build in some of these, and this is knowledge that the farmers or the households have that we just have not fully utilized. So that's one. Another thought is that what I've seen in a lot of cases is when we introduce new technologies, new financing mechanisms, whatever, that often places more risk on the farmers with not a lot of risk mitigation measures for them. So I really like your idea of contract farming because this helps to mitigate some of those risks. If farmers are being asked to introduce new technologies, often there's a cost. If they're trying to change their management practices and introduce drone technology to the farms, there will be a cost. New seeds, there will be a cost. So they are being asked to bear that additional cost. And if things go sideways, like an extreme weather event or a flood, they're going to be the ones that bear the burden of that cost. So we may need to introduce parallel insurance mechanisms or contract farming types so that the risk is not borne on the shoulders of those that we claim to be supporting with these new innovations and policies. Far too often that's not the case. And I've seen plenty of examples in Ethiopia, including, unfortunately, in contract farming, where new innovations or new crops are introduced, like biofuel crops, and the market goes sideways, biofuel prices go down, the investor leaves, and there are no protection measures for the farmers who are again left even more vulnerable than they started. So we really need to think about upon whom are we placing risks and how can we help ensure those risks are mitigated, particularly if we're working with the most vulnerable.
Well said. I guess a key point is getting those people into the room, right? And that addresses the point raised in the earlier session with regards to research being done that is academic in nature, but unable to be applied by the farmers, right? So could you share some examples of how coordinated regulatory, financial, and infrastructural support has successfully unlocked agricultural transformation in different regions? I mean, you touched on it a bit, but, would you be able to?
Let me join the critique of researchers for the moment, although I'm based at a university, and it is very much true. We researchers do research, and the incentives for academics is to publish in top-tier journals. And most often, those top-tier journals are, first of all, not accessible to people. Probably most of you in this room don't have access to the research we publish, unless it's open access, but that's still not the majority. Secondly, when we do publish research, it's written in technical, usually academic English language, which is also not accessible to most people, never mind farmers. So we need to rethink the way that we move on the research production pathway. So a few cool examples, and this is mostly from East Africa, where we wanted to ensure research is not just translated to more accessible forms, but also translated into other languages, the languages that farmers use and work in, and translated into accessible, actionable, and relevant forms of information. So for example, we usually get through the agencies that collect information on rainfall. They aggregate this rainfall based on monthly and annual timeframes. Farmers don't care about that. If you have an average rainfall month, but it all fell on one day, that's a flood. And if you have an average rainfall month, but the last 20 days, but there was none, then your crops may start failing. So this isn't really actionable or usable for farmers. So how we rethink climate service information, and we heard about some of this from the CABI folks, where we really need to go back to the farmers and see what is the information that is actionable and usable for you. And this can bridge this gap between the research side and the implementation side for farmers. Maybe at a higher level, thinking about governance and the implementation space, the enabling policies for how to affect change on the research and innovation down to the farm process. There's different approaches. There's no one size fits all. We need to see for which problem we have, what's the right solution. As I mentioned, in the state of Qatar, we had a systems approach. Many different ministries had mandates related to food security. Ministry of Public Health was doing food safety. The Ministry of Municipality and the Food Security Department was managing aspects related to national targets. We had Commerce and Industry doing import-export regulation. They all had mandate related to aspects of the food system. In this case, we created a committee structure with clear mandates, roles, responsibilities, and importantly, accountability. And this was driven from the highest level. The Prime Minister and His Highness the Emir were watching this every month to see were the various ministries implementing according to plan. So leadership level, clear roles and responsibilities, but didn't change the governance structure. It remained as it was. Other examples closer to here, Singapore, they created Singapore Food Agency, where you've got an amalgamation of mandate around food security. So they essentially reorganized their governance structure. So that's another option. A third option that I mentioned is if you have a particular problem, whether it's childhood well-being and rates of obesity, which we talked about, or farmer uptake at the farm level of new innovation technologies, or food loss, or food waste, whatever that problem may be, is taking a problem-based approach to governance, bringing in all the stakeholders who have mandates or different aspects of control related to that different problem, and they work together collaboratively to address this problem. Because one of the biggest issues that we see from a policy and governance side is that usually one ministry and another ministry are not coordinating, or there's no clear handoff between one ministry and another ministry, or no clear beginning and end of mandate. And this results in uncertainty and often lack of transition from one to another. If we have these problem-based spaces, we can identify where those gaps are and ensure they're actioned.
Great. Now, we have a little bit of time, so I'll just ask you a bit about how we balance innovation, equity, and sustainability, right? So, Dr. Serena, technology diffusion is often constrained by high costs, lack of awareness, or restrictive regulations. What practical steps can governments and institutions take to reduce these barriers?
Hard to answer, I'll try. Number one, we can think about shared service models. So for example, if you have, we call it MADA in Kedah, where they are an entity that kind of covers the rice growing areas, and then they can purchase these high technology, high expensive products, and then they can rent it out for farmers to use on a small scale, for farmers to test out, to try out before they invest largely in products. That's one. Number two is what I mentioned earlier, governments can encourage contract farming where it is profitable. I think they can do that. One more thing I think that's interesting, when I did FGD in Sabah and Sarawak focus group discussion, and I interviewed farmers, there's a very interesting dynamic whereby the male will be at the front, the husbands or the male farmers, they will be vocal and dominant and the women will be very quiet, and they will try to like shy away from the conversation. So I think when we want to do extension programs, when we want to create awareness, for example, in Sabah and Sarawak, the women are also the planters and the growers, but they tend to shy away from these kind of engagements. So I think targeted extension program should be considered when we try to engage the farmers. Those are some of the ideas.
Logan, a quick one. Any thoughts?
Maybe slightly unrelated, but we've been talking a lot about tech and innovation, and everybody loves tech and innovation, and I don't want to say that I'm opposed to tech and innovation or going digital and so forth. There is also a risk that if we have a hammer in our hand, everything looks like a nail. And sometimes if we're really enthusiastic about tech, the answer is always tech. But maybe it's not. And I don't want to say that it's not, but I want to say that sometimes we need to take our blinders or our bias off and reconsider other potential options and maybe put the hammer down and see what other tools are in the toolbox for addressing this particular problem. And if I just share an example from Qatar, we looked into high-tech, vertical farming, indoor farming, and this was going to be a solution for domestic production. So we had companies come from all over the globe, essentially, big firms from South Korea, et cetera, et cetera. And then we did the cost analysis, and it was at least 4 to 6 times more expensive to take this approach. Singapore, where I visited recently, companies having similar challenges. So I'm not saying this isn't a solution or this isn't an option. I'm saying sometimes we need to look in the toolbox. There may be other approaches to achieve our objective in tandem with tech development.
Thanks. So can we open for questions?
That's right. As you guys can actually see that we have the QR code that is being displayed, and we do have several questions, but we can only pick 2 questions here. Yeah, we have the first one right here for Dr. Cochrane. It was mentioned earlier that there are of disruption, yeah, in food trade markets. Can you expound on the types of disruption happening and how it affects the market?
Excellent question, and there's a lot of answers, and intuitively I think we know many of them, but I'll just give a few examples. So COVID-19, so that's a public health emergency. We had global trade completely disrupted. Conflict. Ukraine and Russia conflict significantly disrupted global grain, sunflower, oilseeds markets. And if you want to see the significant impact of conflict globally on food security, until about 2013-14, the decades leading up to that point in time, food security globally was improving. Fewer and fewer people, year by year, were facing hunger until 2014. And then the trends shifted, and unfortunately it's increased since then, primarily due to conflict. So conflict is not just a disruptor of markets, but it's an increase of prices. It doesn't allow farmers to plant. It doesn't allow people to trade, and agricultural producing areas are not able to produce. So conflict is a significant disruptor. Then we could have politically related events. After the 2007-8 triple crisis of food, fuel, and finance, we saw countries feel the risk at home about food security, so they limited exports of food, or in some countries banned the export of food, which disrupts the global food trade market, and we saw commodity prices spike. So we could see political reasons, we could see economic reasons, we could see conflict reasons, we could see environmental reasons. If there's extreme weather events and a production in a particular part of the world is less, we've seen wheat producing areas, for example, hit by drought, so their ability to produce is less. And lastly, the global geopolitical, where we have the bifurcation of trade, sort of with us or against us in trade networks. And again, this increases the potential for cost, trade networks, and all of these together make our global food system much more vulnerable than it was just a few years ago.
I think we have 30.
Thank you. We still have one more.
Okay.
We changed the question here. All right, this one is for Dr. Sarina. if rice receives so many subsidies and incentive, the private somehow reluctant to invest it. So politicians are also reluctant to initiate painful action. Is rice a liability to Malaysia? So, Dr. Serena.
Jang, jang, jang. Is it a liability? I always tell people this. You want self-sufficiency at what cost? Okay? So right now, rice self-sufficiency is at 60%. That means we produce out of, the demand for the country, our local production can only meet 60% of it. The rest we import. Okay? So let's say we at all costs must be self-sufficient, 100%. Malaysia must produce all the rice for Malaysia's needs. But at what cost? If it means that it's going to cost the taxpayers billions, if it means that the industry is dead, if it means that the farmers continue to be stuck in poverty, I don't think the answer is that. So I think actually, again, maintaining, addressing liability, you don't need to be 100% self-sufficient. In fact, even if we're at 60 or 50%, but if there is profitability, if we can reduce subsidy, and the other thing I want to tell you is that we don't always need to be 100% self-sufficient, because there's always a demand for sushi rice, there's always a demand for basmati rice, there's always a demand for different types of rice. So I think we cannot make it 100% at all costs, and therefore if it does, it is a liability and it's not worth it, because food security really isn't just carbohydrates. It's about your ulam. Like I say, I always emphasize the ulam because that's something you can just grow in your backyard and you will get all the antioxidants that you need. But yeah, so to answer your question, if it is rice at all costs, I think it is a liability to the country. We should take a step back and remember that we are no longer in the era of the 1950s, 1960s. We are now becoming a almost developed country. Our issues are different. Like exactly what Dr. Logan said, right? The world has more overweight children than underweight children. That tells you something. That we should reshift the way we think for Malaysia, moving away from rice obsession to looking into nutrition, not eating chicken nugget and Maggi mee every day, for example. I think these are things that we should think about. Thank you.
Okay, we are out of time,
yes,
but I'm going to take up a bit more time by getting you to just sum up a take-home message for everybody here very quickly.
Sure, start with me?
Yes.
Ladies first again. So I think again to everyone, always go back to the definition of food security. Remember that, because I don't want Malaysia to lose focus on what is really important, which is the 5 dimensions of food security. Accessibility, availability, I can't remember now, stability, utilization, and agency. Don't forget that. The other thing is enabling policies, and if you remember, subsidy is not really the only answer towards ensuring technology adoption. If you want private sector to champion it, you got to make sure it is profitable. I think that's only fair. Contract farming is really a valuable solution that we should think about. And finally, Malaysia should focus on what we can do well. And that is things that we can grow tropically that grows well. So our tropical fruits, our tropical vegetables, our ulam, our ubi kayu, I think these are things that we should champion. Now, people can say, why do you want to sell ulam? Because you cannot sell it at a profit margin. But that's not the case. We can export it and brand it as a product that is very unique to Malaysia. Imagine ulam raja being the next rocket salad being sold in Marks and Spencer's in the United States, in the United Kingdom. So I think these are things to think about. And for food security in Malaysia, these local crops are so resilient that you can grow it in your house. I've done it. I'm growing pegaga, and I can tell you pegaga, ulam raja, and daun selom are things you can grow in your backyard, and that will fulfill your fibrous and your nutritional needs for your vegetable intake. So yeah, that's it.
Logan?
Some of the people that need to be in the room, that are not always in the room for the changes that we've been speaking about, include ministries of education. Azizul told us, where is the aspirational, where is the motivational components for young people to not only become farmers, but also rethink food? So then we need those types of people in the room. Are we communicating through our schools, through our curriculum, through our nutritional guides, through our media, the type of change we would like to see in the world? A future generation of farmers and a future generation of healthy eaters who love local food. If we're not doing that, we need those types of media personalities, influencers, and Ministry of Curriculum type folks in the room with us so we can recreate those aspirational and motivational messages together.
Thank you very much. Would you please join me in thanking our two fantastic panelists?
Thank you again, Dr. Hari Kula Veerasingham, and of course, our amazing panelists right here. One more time, ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a huge round of applause to Dr. Sarina Chioma and Dr. Logan Cochrane for those valuable insights on policies and technologies that shape food resilience. Of course, we would like to take a very quick photo with our moderator and panelists. Let's have a very big smile. Can we have a thumbs up as well?